Hello, I'm Dr. Jodie Richardson, and you're listening to Well, Hello Anxiety, a podcast where we end the struggle with anxiety and build our toolkit of practical skills to thrive. Stuck in a pattern of drinking to stop the anxiety that the drinking was causing was ruining the life of today's wonderful guest. Meg Webb was stuck in a cycle that was making her anxiety bigger and stronger, had her jumping from job to job, feeling unfulfilled, and with a gut feeling life had so much more to offer. I'm happy to say that things are very different for Meg now, and she's absolutely found her purpose living alcohol-free, coaching others through their sobriety journey, and co-hosting the podcast She's Sober Sydney with Bella. It's been an absolute joy for me being a guest for Meg on her podcast. And after we spoke, I said, you've got to come on my podcast. I would love my community to hear your story and to learn from you. So Meg, welcome and thank you very much for joining us here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Jodie. I'm so happy to be here and excited.
Oh, look, it's just wonderful. When we first connected for Meg's podcast recording, we just hit it off straight away. And I really love the way that Meg shares about her experiences and her journey. And Meg, I'd really love for you to start by talking to us about what anxiety was like for you growing up, and what do you recall about sort of when anxiety started to become a challenge for you?
Sure, yes. Let's go right back. Well, over the years, I kind of had a generalized anxiety disorder, and then I developed a social phobia. So my earliest memories of just generalized anxiety, I can take it back to, I think, maybe when I was about 9, even younger. I did worry a lot about my brother, who was younger than me. So I had this worry in me. And then when I was about 9, we had a break-in. And from then on, I was always quite scared. So I didn't want to be alone at night in my own room. So that kind of generalized thing started back then. And I remember through my teen years that always worrying about my family members. So if my mum went out, she might have gone to get Chinese takeaway. I still remember that. She'd drive up to get it and I'd worry till she got back that, something had happened to her. So I lived quite in a state of fear, I guess, around my loved ones. And then at night I'd take my mattress into my brother's room when I woke up, because we lived in a big house and I felt scared. And then when I was 17, I was speaking in front of my class, and I really enjoyed getting up and speaking in front of the class. I loved doing acting, all sorts of things, and I kind of thought it might be in my future. And then I stood up in front of the class, as I often did, and the paper I was holding started to shake, and it was the beginning of a really horrible social phobia where I couldn't not only speak in front of other people, but it turned into I couldn't hold a drink or eat in front of other people because I'd shake so much. So it became the sort of background of every single thing I did, and trying to cover that up was really exhausting. I was in year 11 when that happened. I couldn't do my orals in the HSC because back then they didn't let you do it in another room with a couple of people. You had to do it in front of your class or you couldn't do it. I remember one time getting up in front of my school. I was at a Catholic girls' school and we did liturgical dance, and I'd always loved it. But after this, I just shook, and so I sort of stood like a statue, and it was humiliating. It was so embarrassing. So I had to then avoid things like that, and just the worry of what if they make me get up and do something, and it continued into my adulthood. But that was my earliest memory of that. And then, as I said before that, there was just generalized worry and anxiety.
When it comes to generalized anxiety, that's it, isn't it? It's worry about anything and everything. And you had an incident, obviously, with a break-in that gave you cause for fear about the potential of that happening again. You said that you were worried about your brother. Was there something that caused you to be worried about him, or were you just a beautiful, protective big sister?
I don't know if it was that I just had it in me, because I know there is a generational anxiety, and I did find out, I know that my dad was very anxious and his mum was, and I guess in a way my mum was too, but so I think I was born with it, but my brother was also hit by a car when he was 5, so I would have been 8, so maybe even before the break-in. He was okay, but it traumatized me. He didn't go to hospital. Thank goodness it was on an uphill, and so the car was going very slowly. But I remember that night lying awake all night and not talking to anyone about it, my parents. So I was very worried. And then when he was a bit older, he fell off a bike, and I was probably in about year 6, and again, just worrying. It just happened that he had these incidences, but then I had a sister, and I worried. My immediate family, I just always worried. So, yeah.
Yes, and the shaking that you talk about, I know that shaking when our bodies are fueled with adrenaline because we're anxious, and we're anxious talking in front of a group because we care about doing a good job, and we need a bit of anxiety to kind of get us up and get us going. But when there's so much, and that shaking's one of those really obvious symptoms of anxiety, isn't it? So much else about anxiety can be really kept quite private. The racing heart, the numbness and tingling, the blurry vision, the lightheadedness. You don't necessarily see that in another person, but when you're holding paper and you're shaking and you're worried about that happening, of course, that just drives more anxiety, which makes that symptom worse, which just eventually fuels this anxiety that obviously was so paralyzing for you.
Yeah, it was. And I'd get annoyed sometimes thinking, why couldn't I have had like the racing heart or something? Why did it have to be so obvious?
Yeah.
And I mean, a lot of it came down to, once I worked through it, the self-esteem, the worrying what people thought. So it was no wonder it came out in such a way that I felt judged, because I was so worried about being judged. And yeah, so it really affected everything. And I ended up getting a job at Channel 10 when I was 21, and I loved it. But they decided that I was in the newsroom, and I was just doing some general production and assistance in the newsroom. And then they said I could do auto cue for the news. And I loved it because I was in a studio, and that's what, that just made me so happy. But it was the most scary thing ever because I shook, and turning the auto cue with your hand, I just felt it was such pressure. And every single day, I didn't know if they'd ask me to do it. So it was living in a constant, I guess, fight or flight, being ready. And it was awful because it was something I liked, but something I was so scared of. And I didn't really want to be told I was doing it, because then I'd just panic. Oh, it was hard. And I did it, and no one knew what I was going through, but it was the longest hour every day when I had to do that, just getting through that news bulletin. Yeah, it was just, it sounds, I didn't tell people because I wouldn't have even known how to approach it. Back then, I know that I didn't think anyone would understand. I did see a lovely psychologist, but even then, it just wasn't as, I don't know if it's so acceptable now, but it just wasn't talked about. Like, I couldn't work out how to get the right help. So I just tried to deal with it myself. And it was a long, exhausting road.
Oh, and what happened at Channel 10? Did you stay, or was this part of the start of that cycle of kind of moving from one job to another to really find your purpose, or was it avoiding the challenges that came with the anxiety you felt when you were doing that role?
I always wanted to work in TV, and I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do. It all went back to when I was about 4 years old. My dad worked in advertising, and I went to an ad with him, and I just loved the whole cameras and everything. And I was like, I want to do that. So I didn't study or anything. I just wrote to all the TV stations, and I got a job there. And because the anxiety had kicked in by then, I was trying to look for ways I could stay there, like editing or something. But in the end, it was so exhausting. I was there for 2 years. I travelled overseas in the end, and went and met my cousin for 2 years in London, and that brought its own challenges, ending up working in a pub. And because we had nowhere to live and knowing that I'd shake. So again, it just,
Oh,
it was everything. But once I did that, I really enjoyed it. And obviously, after 5 months, well, during the 5 months, I could pour the beers and I was okay. But then after it, I still had the anxiety disorder. Sometimes you can do the thing and it helps. And it did help in that situation, but it came back again after. Yeah, so I didn't, and I ended up being a photographer. So I did end up with cameras in my life and I really enjoyed that. But now that I can look back, I think I didn't want to do acting. I think that was just a way I thought I could get into that sort of area. But after working in TV, I realized it was quite almost isolating because a lot of the shifts are at night. Where I was, there weren't windows. It just wasn't really what my passion was, I don't think. So yeah, I moved on. I did some photography and traveled and then had kids. And yeah, so it's been a long time sort of working out what I wanted to do with my life.
yes, it's very much it's a scribbly path, I think, when we're finding our way professionally. Somebody asked me the other day, how did you arrive at where you're at? And my first question should always be, well, how long have you got? And really, what I say after that is that I really took a step, enjoyed where I was for a period of time, every single time, but then got this feeling like what you talk about that not quite sure if this is what life has in store for me. And another opportunity would open up or I'd create it and I'd take another step forward. And each time you move forward, it opens your eyes to what other opportunities are around. You meet more people and you learn more about what you love or what really lights you up and what you don't want as a part of your profession. But it's never a straight path, is it?
No, definitely very squiggly. But like you said, I did enjoy every step. There were bits that were scary, but I did enjoy it. And I think without it all, I wouldn't be clear on where I am now. It's been interesting. I've met so many people, so I can't complain, even though it was hard at the time. It got me where I am now. So,
Yes, it's all growth, isn't it? It's all growth and learning and yes, but not easy. And it takes courage, I think, and it's hard with anxiety to step into something new as well because anxiety wants to keep us safe and comfortable, and those feelings are so painful sometimes to experience. That's how sometimes we can stay very small in our world when we have anxiety because the anxiety of change can be prohibitive when it comes to doing something different. When did you start to really understand that anxiety was at the heart of the struggles that you'd experienced?
oh, I knew from a young age that what I was going through was blocking me from certain things. But I guess it's only been in the last 10 years or so that I realized how much it affected me and how much covering it up caused other issues. But also now it's the first time I can look back and go, oh, quite amazing that I did step through, and keep going because I definitely could have hidden away. But something inside me, I read a lot of self-help books as a teenager. My mum got me onto, I think, Wayne Dyer's when I was 17. And it's helped me step into the uncomfortable. It's helped me somehow keep going. There's a saying, some lovely girl was, when I speak, I shake or something, but she kept going. I saw it was a hashtag a couple of years ago. I can't remember who it was, but it's like that. It's like, feel the fear. And in fact, I think one of the first books I read was Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. So to a degree, that's helped me a lot. It didn't help me stand up and talk at the time when I was in high school, but I couldn't have. That was too major for me. But it has helped me put one foot in front of the other. And I don't want to say it's been so traumatic because I've been very lucky in so many ways in my life. But it has been debilitating in a lot of ways. And I do feel that I didn't achieve things because of it.
And it's a very different road for everybody. And it's interesting that you say that. I know because we can compare ourselves, and some people have crippling anxiety where they can't leave their homes. Some people have really high functioning anxiety, and I did an episode with Sophie Scott around high functioning anxiety, and there's everything in between. And the thing about our own individual journey is that we know how it's affected us, and the pain and the suffering and the opportunity cost. It's very personal, and each person listening will have their own very personal journey as well. And that's why I'm so thankful to you for sharing about yours, and this mix of generalized anxiety and then this social phobia. And I look at how far you come, and I know there's more to talk about in between, but here you are with your own podcast. You're talking to me on mine. So you found your voice again. And I think that that's so inspiring for people listening, because we go into fight or flight, because we have all these physical symptoms, the shaking and all of the internal symptoms that we've spoken about before, the upset tummy, the nausea, the diarrhea, the running to the toilet, the challenges with breathing, the thinking patterns that change, that it can close a lot of doors. And so it's harder sometimes with anxiety to walk through those doors. And I say kudos to you, because you've followed that squiggly line, and it's led you to where you are now, and you've got your experiences to share with the people that you inspire through your work and through your coaching. And one of the big challenges I know that you found was turning to alcohol to help you cope with your anxiety. And I was thinking before, when you were talking about working in a pub in London, which is a classic Aussie thing to do, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
That environment obviously is really conducive to having a drink after work, and you're around a lot of drinking. Was that when you first turned to alcohol, or do you recall a different stage of your life?
Yeah, surprisingly, I was probably even better then, I think, because I worked late shifts and went to bed. But I was 22, and so I really discovered alcohol at 18. I hadn't drunk alcohol before I was 18. And then when I went after year 12, we went camping and someone gave me some whiskey, and I'd kind of avoided alcohol as well because I didn't like how it made people behave. I was a bit scared of it. And anyway, for some reason I said, okay, and I had half a cup or something. I mean, that's pretty full on for your first drink. And I was drunkish. And I remember something about it. I just stopped worrying for that brief time. And it just, sadly, it was like, oh, wow, this is what I've been looking for. And after that, I went to surface for schoolies. That was a massive drinking week. I'd only been drinking for less than a month in my life. And up there, it was constant. I was falling over, as were a lot of people. We were all young and silly, but it really made me confident. So I thought, in front of people, I could eat and drink. I could be kind of the old me, except that I crossed a line when I was drinking and drank too much. It was embarrassing, really. It went from giving me that bit of confidence, but I could never, ever stop. So I started as a binge drinker. My whole life is all or nothing type. I was always like that. So I just grabbed onto it. And so for the next couple of years, whenever I went out, I drank so that I could socialize, because I am quite outgoing. I always was. It just helped take away that anxiety, I guess. And obviously, alcohol leads to anxiety because the next day you feel hungover, you don't feel at your best, anxiety can get worse, and over time, definitely. But I wasn't drinking all the time back then. It was really just socially. So I could kind of handle it and not think of it as making it worse. It really was a medication for me. And I was my friend's bridesmaid, and I actually got beta blockers for that because they meant to make you stop shaking. The doctor prescribed them to walk down the aisle as a bridesmaid and then straight into the drinking. Thankfully, I didn't drink beforehand. That could have got into quite a bad situation early. But it did progress to where if I was going out, I'd drink beforehand, just maybe one glass of something to calm my nerves so I could walk into a function and eat. And like the canapes were my worst nightmare, reaching out and taking a piece of food. And it sounds weird, but that for what I had, my shaking, I couldn't do that. And if you walked into, say, a wedding and they handed you a champagne and a canape, I couldn't take them. So I'd have to always have excuses. And sometimes I remember saying, just put my drink down there, please, like awkward and weird. And then I'd go over when no one's looking and have a few sips. And if I could get most of the glass in, it'd calm me down and then I could pick it up and walk around. Like that's how I dealt with a lot of things that were social.
Oh, Meg. I'm just picturing you, and I know that the anxiety would have been building the minute you're invited somewhere. It's a great fear with the social phobia that you're going to embarrass yourself, that you're going to say or do the wrong thing. And that's so common for people with a social phobia. But this idea that people are going to observe and notice this shakiness in your hands, I can understand how debilitating that would have been. It's what do you do with your hands? That you must have been so preoccupied that even when you were in conversation, even though what to say wasn't necessarily the fuel for your anxiety, it was how your hands were shaking, you likely wouldn't have been able to even concentrate. So the whole thing, I can see how the anxiety would just spiral and become more and more and more difficult as the evening progressed.
Yeah, thinking now, just hearing you talk, there were so many things, like even shaking someone's hand could be a problem. It varied. There were better and worse times. So yes, if I was invited somewhere, I had to know that I could get a drink because one drink would just calm the shaking. So it literally became my tool to deal with it. I didn't care how I felt the next day. Nothing mattered as long as I could get rid of that shaking. And sometimes, exactly like you said, I wasn't concentrating on what I was saying, and I can look back and just go, I must have sounded ridiculous sometimes because I wouldn't have made sense. But if they'd known what I was going through, I think it would have made sense. And even there was times at work, different jobs, and I remember Channel 10, there were some other jobs I had when the boss would ask me for coffee, to bring them coffee, and worst nightmare. So if I had to bring 2 cups of coffee for whoever they had in their office and them, it was so embarrassing. I'd have to stop at my desk, put one down and take one in and say, oh, I hurt my wrist. I had to make up an excuse as to why I wasn't just bringing 2 coffees in. Simple as that ruined my day. Or the day before I'd think, oh no, my boss is in. What if she wants coffees?
Oh.
It's just a constant panic. And so I'd be walking in with one coffee, then going out and getting another. And I knew at the time I looked stupid. And I thought, well, what else can I do?
You were surviving. You were doing what you could to survive, and other people around you may not have thought the things you imagined that they were thinking, but it doesn't matter because it's your internal monologue. It's what you're thinking. And then the rest of the day you're worrying about what they're thinking. And it detracts from life. It detracts from enjoyment and connection and learning and growth. And it's really difficult. And you being able to share this, and it's always interesting, isn't it, when you look back, because as you start talking about your experiences, I know that this is occurring with you here and now, and I've found the same thing, that you go, oh, and I remember this and I remember that. And you start to sort of piece together all of the different ways that life was impacted, and anyone alone might not look or feel like, oh, this is a big deal, but you've got to think about the way this combination of challenges affected you each and every day. And just this anxiety of someone's going to ask me for a coffee. And how do I explain to someone? I mean, you never would dream of saying anything. You may not have even had the explanation that you needed to understand it yourself at the time. And so you sharing this with us, I know there are listeners who are probably reflecting right now on how anxiety has affected them. And look how far we've come. We can talk about it now. We can understand it, and we know so much about what to do. So you sharing today is a gift. So I thank you again.
Oh, thank you. It's my pleasure. If I can just make one person go, oh, I'm not alone. I wish I'd had someone that had experienced something similar. I think that would have been helpful. I did have very few people I told. I had one friend, and I said to her, because ironically, my mum opened a cafe and I wanted to work with her, like of all things. And I actually
Coffee all
learned
day.
through, I know, but I learned how to, I said to her, can I not work, but can I just take someone a plate of a muffin, right? And slowly I did my own cognitive behavior therapy to take things to tables. So I called a friend and said, can you meet me at the cafe? And I need to do some cognitive behavior therapy. I need to sit with you and just have a drink of water. And so she was really lovely enough to do that. And then I said, I've got to use a fork. And it's such small steps, but that's the amazing thing about CBT. It's not always possible to do it. So I was lucky I had that environment where I could, and I felt safe, and it was just with a friend. And then with my mum, I'd just say, oh, can I take that plate over? And I wasn't working there at that point, so there was no pressure on me. If it didn't work out, I could just run away,
Yes.
But it was always about small steps. And I think for anyone listening, the small steps are so incredibly helpful, but sometimes there's not the opportunity, but just maybe knowing someone's been through it is helpful. And I even had someone recently message me because on my podcast I spoke about my story, and they said, oh, my son and I, we shake. We shake even at the dentist, our mouth shakes. We've never told anyone. And they're quite vibrant personalities. And they're like, we just didn't know you were like that. We have that. And so opening that up for other people to know it's okay, it was amazing. It was a really amazing communication from them to just go, oh my gosh, I've helped someone, they've, helped me. And
Yes. Oh,
yeah,
it is.
we're not alone.
It gives me chills because just knowing we're not alone in our challenges, and anyone who is living with the challenge of anxiety that's getting in the way. And just a reminder that everybody experiences anxiety every single day, every single day. And it's completely normal, but normal anxiety comes and goes with a stressful situation, like going to the dentist or speaking to your peers at work or sitting an exam or going for a job interview or asking someone a date, et cetera, et cetera. But at the other end of the spectrum is anxiety that gets in the way of daily life. And that's absolutely what you're describing here. And those small steps, those little inching closer, those baby steps are so powerful. And oh, goodness, I want to dive down that conversation, but I'm going to stop myself because I want to learn more about alcohol and what happened with your drinking that led you to realize I need to do something about this.
Yeah. So the first time I drank, as I said, I had more than was normal. Well, not normal, but recommended. So I say from the first drink, I binged. I think in the back of my mind, I always knew that was an issue because there's no way I ever would have wanted one or two from even the beginning. And it was manageable. Well, it was acceptable in my 20s because especially traveling, everyone did it. Like I know that everyone was drinking with me and in general. So I didn't stand out as though I had a problem, that's for sure. I did have my first daughter when I was 24, so I was young, and that I didn't drink. That was not an issue. That was quite good because I didn't even think about it until she was maybe 1 or 2, and I'm like, oh, I can socialize now. So, but only when I went out, never at home. So that was okay. I then had my second daughter 7 years later and my son 3 years after that. So it was probably after my son was born. My anxiety had definitely increased after having children because they were more humans to worry about and they were my children. Parents will know if you're going to worry,
Oh my
it's about
gosh.
your kids.
Yes.
So that it did add to my anxiety. I had anxieties around even dropping my kids at school if they'd be okay. I never voiced that, but I remember my mother-in-law asking me once, well, you feel all right when they're at school, don't you? And I was like, and I thought, no, I don't. So I think once my son was born, the drinking did start to increase. And I think it was just because the anxiety had increased and it was exhausting even more so. And so probably if that was 14 years ago, I still went out quite a bit with friends and we still were drinking, like in my late 30s, early 40s. I thought everyone was. I do think quite a few of my friends were. But I started getting that niggle probably when my son was 2, maybe 12 years ago, that I do need to do something about this. But I didn't for another 7 years, I don't think. And over that time, not the whole time, but over that time, I started to drink at home. Probably not until 6 or 7 years ago, I started to drink at home by myself quite often. And then when COVID hit, that was a great excuse that I could anyway because no one was going anywhere. So it didn't matter. And then I did stop before COVID in 2018 for 4.5 months. I had a break from alcohol. I even went to AA and checked that out because I'd been recommended it and I loved the community. That's when I discovered people going through the same is so important. But I did start drinking again. And so that was 2019 and I stopped in 21. So for 2 years, it went straight back to as bad as it was, if not worse, drinking every night. I knew after the first time I stopped, I was going to stop, but I kind of knew in the back of my mind something bad was going to happen. Was I waiting for something bad to happen before I stopped? So, for example, when I drove my kids to school, I was worried I was over the limit from the night before.
Oh, yes,
And I
okay.
started to worry that what if I got pulled over and I was over the limit, not from drinking in the morning, but from the night before? I'll be on the news, And I'm like, I can't, I'm not going to do that. And then my middle daughter got extremely upset with me with the drinking. She's probably my most anxious child. It's
Yes.
passed on again, fancy that. And she was getting very angry. She was about 14 and I just knew something had to give. And unfortunately, on the last night I drank in 2021, it was in September, I actually slipped in the bath and broke my rib. So that was a bit of a eye-opener for me. And I started This Naked Mind. Annie Grace had a program, the Live Alcohol Experiment, and I started that and I now coach through her as a This Naked Mind coach. And that went till the end of September. I did actually drink again for a month or two, not as much, and stopped on New Year's Eve of 2021. And that was it. And I haven't, with what I learned through This Naked Mind, I've never craved it again. I'm very happy without alcohol. I choose not to drink. I don't think I'll choose to again. There's nothing I could say could add to my life by even having one drink. Yeah, so it got quite bad. It got far worse than I ever imagined. And I have felt shame over that and regret, but I've also learned that that's not going to help. So, yeah.
I know that you are an extremely compassionate coach when it comes to working with other people who are going through this exact experience because you have lived it and you've lived through the challenges of having a child that is well aware of what's happening, having an accident, having the worries about being over the limit the next day, driving the kids to school. I mean, I can understand why all of that just fed into a feeling of needing to change. You said that you stopped, then you started again, and then you stopped on New Year's Eve. What do you recommend to people who are listening, who are thinking, I know my drinking is hurting me and it's hurting other people around me. I know that I'm using it as a coping mechanism for stress and anxiety. And what we know is it actually does make anxiety worse. We know that from a physiological perspective. There are a lot of reasons why that happens. What do you recommend to people who are thinking of, I'm going to stop, but I'm going to wait for a significant date? Is that a common line of thought? And what do you say when you're talking to people about making this decision?
It's definitely not unusual to wait for a certain date. Because it was New Year's Eve, obviously I did. But before that, I had just stopped. I think I've learned a lot more since then. And with other things, I just do it. I would suggest if you've got that niggle, it's not going to go away. We can always wait for that date or when that wedding's finished or whatever. There's always going to be an excuse. So I do believe if you are thinking about it, give it a go. Look at it as an experiment. I did the 30-day alcohol experiment, and what I found was a community. Again, the community is what has made all the difference. On Instagram, I follow many sober people and wonderful people like you and Sophie Scott. Anything that's going to inspire me, I got rid of a lot of the negative. And so I feel like I've always got people around, even if it's online. And I'm a coach now, but I did get coaching. That was invaluable. I joined some local groups. There's Australia, and they are in most states. I went out last Saturday night with a group. It's a meetup group of intoxicated people, and some of them are like me. They've given up drinking. Some of them are just not big drinkers. It's a lovely social thing. We went to Vivid in Sydney, and it was a lovely night out. There's lots of social things you can do, because a big problem a reason that people might put off stopping drinking can be the social, and they worry they'll lose friends or they'll be boring or get bored. So I haven't lost friends. There's probably one or two drinking buddies that maybe, but when I looked into it, we didn't really have a deep relationship. All my other friends we meet at different times now, or we do lunches, brunches, walks, early dinners. I love an early dinner. And then you make new friends. I've made so many new friends in these new communities, and we're on similar interests. So that's been amazing. But yeah, I say get the people around you, get the support. There are free ways to do it. Like I said, This Naked Mind offers that. There's coaching, like I offer, podcasts, Quit Lit books. They all helped me so much. And so I don't think you need to wait for a date, because there's so much out there to support you if you begin right now.
I really appreciate that insight from you through your experience, because I can see how people could look at the calendar and I've just got this, I've just got that. And really, there's a saying, the best time to start was 20 years ago. If you can't do that, do today or something like that. And
yes.
And I think it's true for so many things, with our exercise, with our nutrition. Oh, there's so much more that we could talk about. But what I really want to ask you is to please share with our listeners today a monumentous achievement that you've experienced in recent weeks. And I learned about this when we connected for your podcast. And so could you please share with our listeners, to kind of bring this conversation to full circle, what you did recently and what your experience was like? You know what I'm talking about, don't you?
Yeah, I do, because it was, yes, momentous. Yeah, so right back from when I was 17, standing on that stage, and the last time I did that was then, but I knew that it was something I did enjoy and I wanted to do in some way in my future. And so tonight will be my third week of Toastmasters.
Oh, third week. Congratulations. Yes. Tell us about week one. Oh my gosh, I can just imagine how you must have felt walking into that first Toastmasters meeting. So can you firstly explain for listeners who don't know what Toastmasters is, what it is, and tell us about week one and the experience?
Yeah, well, back when I don't remember how old I was, but Toastmasters was recommended to me, maybe by a psychologist, I'm not sure. It's a place where you go to learn public speaking or practice it and sort of polish it. And I remember I went when I was maybe 30 and I was scared to death. So I left and I never went back. It was quite formal, it seemed to me. It's a safe environment to go and speak in front of a group. You do a speech, and it's the first time you go, you can just watch it. But this time round, it popped up on my Facebook. In my suburb was a Toastmasters 5-week course you were going to do. It said 5 speeches, and I just went, this is a sign. I'm jumping in head first. I'm going to do it. And that was 2 days before the day. And I think that was the best part, because if it had been a month, I would have had a month of worry. So we just had to write a speech to introduce ourselves. And because I've been doing the podcasting and everything, what I was going to say, I knew. I didn't know it off by heart, but I knew what to talk about. So I felt a bit confident in that respect, that it was going to be about me. So there wasn't as much pressure. But obviously, yes, it was extremely nerve-wracking. I think in the last couple of years, I've stepped out of my comfort zone so many times that I just have learned to say, just do it and feel the fear, like I've said before. But also, I told them before I got up, this talk was going to be about my full circle, 17 to now. So I was going to tell them, but even before that, I said, look, this is my greatest fear. And that just helped calm me a bit. It was about 12 people, which is actually big for someone that hasn't done that for a long time, but lovely people. And there were 4 of us starting, but I was the first speaker out of the 4. And it was like, oh my goodness. It was amazing once I'd done it. And I had 2 people come up to me after, because it is quite a formal setting. No one really says a lot at the time. They do evaluate you after. So it's very nerve-wracking. But 2 people did come up to me after and said that was amazing and touching. And I hadn't expected that response, but very caring of them. So it is a very caring atmosphere. And then the next speech the next week, they do say, oh, maybe don't say this, or very constructive, and there's a lot of positive and just a little bit of constructive criticism. And I've learned to take on board constructive criticism over the last couple of years. It's going to be helpful. But the fact is, I didn't shake, and I still can't quite believe it. I can't actually remember the whole thing, because I was in that anxiety stage, but I did it both weeks, and I think I spoke clearly, and I didn't fumble as much as I did when I was practicing. So it's cognitive behavior therapy again. And I think the podcast has helped a lot, even though it's different doing that because we're not in front of an audience. And I think COVID helped, because during COVID I had Zooms with work, and I made sure I said something on those Zooms, because that did scare me, because I could see all the faces. And so I've slowly practiced a bit through COVID doing the Zooms. So yeah, to get to Toastmasters is an absolute full circle, and it was the best feeling in the whole world. And I do hope eventually to be able to speak like you do on my drinking journey and anxiety. And so it is important to me to learn how to do it properly and to just get past that fear. But saying that, there's always going to be a bit of fear, and that's fine. But it's just amazing to have come so far. And I could get stuck in a bit of regret that I didn't do it earlier, but I'm not, because everything has happened in the right order, and I think it allows me to help more people this way.
I think so too. I think one of the greatest gifts that was shared with me and that I share is this idea of focusing on what we can control. And that puts our head and our heart exactly where we can make a difference, and saves us wasting time and energy on the things that we cannot change. And so I so appreciate you for who you are, the journey that you are on, because it's certainly only part of the story. There's so much more of the story to write. And I applaud you, because I know that you are a shining example of taking your anxiety with you, showing up to Toastmasters. I mean, I feel anxious at the thought of going to Toastmasters, and I could speak on a stage with 5,000 people in the audience.
Yeah.
And isn't it funny? It's this idea of, this putting yourself in a position to share your craft. And the beauty of Toastmasters is that you're getting loving and compassionate and constructive feedback from people who have constructive feedback to share. And I think that that's a really important lesson for all of us. That sometimes people will offer feedback. We do not actually have to accept feedback from everybody who wants to give it to us.
Yes.
And I think that's a really big learning too. But you've thrown yourself in to a personal challenge, and the growth that you're experiencing from it, and the inspiration that brings to everyone who knows you and the people that are listening today, I know is going to have a ripple effect for other people who want to do something. It might not be public speaking, but have something on their hearts that they really want to do, but anxiety's been holding them back. Meg, I'm so grateful for your time and for you sharing your journey and your story with us. How can people connect with you to learn more about you, to work with you, and to listen to your podcast?
Yes. Well, my website is glassfulfilled.com.au and my podcast is called She's Sober Sydney, and we're on Apple, Google and Spotify. And I'm on Instagram under Glass Fulfilled and She's Sober Sydney. And I do have a course at the moment that you can find through Glass Fulfilled on Instagram. There's a link tree. And I do my coaching. You can also find that through my website or Linktree.
Oh, fantastic. I'm going to put all of those details in the show notes. Meg, thank you again for your time. Good luck tonight at Toastmasters. I'm really excited for you. I really look forward to staying in touch and really appreciate you sharing your journey with us here today.
Thank you so much, Jodie. It's been so good to meet you, and thank you so much.
Thanks. And thank you for listening. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's always such a pleasure to have your company for the podcast, and I look forward to being back with you again next week. Bye. Thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and leave a review. To keep the conversation going, I'd love you to join me over on Instagram. You'll find me at Dr. Jodie Richardson. Also, if you'd like a copy of my free 5-day mini email course, Calm Your Anxious Brain, then jump over to my website, drjodirichardson.com, and you can sign up down the bottom. I've really enjoyed having your company. Thanks so much. See you next time.